guys, welcome back to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm host Amy Gardner-Dean. It is episode JL68 for everyone playing along at home with us. If you're curious about any of these products, you want to see kind of the pages to find out a little bit more about them after the fact, you'll put in JL68 in the search bar on jerrysartorama.com. That will pull up the entire list of all the products that Brian's going to be showing us today. We've got the head honcho, the big cheese, the director of sales from Logan Graphic Products, Brian Buell, here with us. Bueller. See, now you said that. Now it's stuck in my head. So now I will be calling you that. I apologize.
I'm okay with that.
Sorry, he's from Wisconsin. I'm from Michigan. We've been,
That's kind of
and we're the same age, so it's kind of a fun. Close enough.
Far enough from the south for y'all to compare.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and there's just the lake between, so, you know.
It's just a lake.
Just the lake. So, but he is going to be teaching us basic mat cutting today with Logan Products, and we're all going to learn a lot, and I think we're probably going to learn how much money you can actually save by doing it yourself if you do the type of art that requires mats, because it really is all in the presentation. Sometimes that alone, I think, can make the sale. If it's already all ready to go.
Yeah, we'll talk about different advantages to cutting it your own versus paying or trying to find your own supplies. There's a couple different ways to do it.
Awesome. So let's get started, because we've got a lot of stuff to go through, and I want to make sure that you guys get the most education possible and have plenty of time to be able to ask Brian questions. Right. So take it away.
Okay. Thank you for everyone logging in here. I appreciate it. Again, my name's Brian. I'm with Logan Graphic Products. We are in the Chicago suburbs, and we have been there since the early 1970s. We've been making mat cutting equipment primarily for all that time, and we specialize in mat cutting equipment that is made for sort of the DIY market, for at-home people, artists, photographers, crafters. That's our main market of users. However, we also make do-it-yourself picture framing tools. If you want to build your own frames, it's a cut, sand, join, finish process. We have a line of what are called foamworks tools, which are used on foamboard for crafting or 3D modeling. We also have a line of pre-cut mats. Today we're going to talk about some of our different mat cutting equipment. I'm going to use a very basic mat cutter here today. That's a very popular one that's very affordable, although we have a really big line. We'll talk a little bit about that. But what I'm going to show you today, even though it's going to be on a very basic mat cutter, you can transfer this knowledge to virtually any mat cutter that we make. They're very similar. So once you learn the basics of how to mark out a mat and cut the opening, you can transfer that to really any type of mat cutter that you buy from us. So mat cutting is on your own is a way to certainly save money. If you're an artist and you're selling your pieces, like for example, where I live, we have a lot of these sort of art in the park things. And you'll see these pop-up tents, and the artists will be in there with their flip racks, and they'll be selling their art. Well, if you can manage to sell it at least matted, if not in some kind of a frame, it's much more likely to sell that way.
Definitely.
Because people can take it home immediately and put it on the wall. And otherwise, it'll sit in their closet for 2 or 3 years until they figure out who's going to frame it for them. So if you can manage to get it there, then that's an enormous advantage to selling it right there. So there's a couple of different ways to accomplish that. You certainly can go to a professional frame shop and have your pieces done. But if you are an artist and you're doing this on a regular basis and you're making some money on this, well, you really shouldn't have to pay full retail price to have that done. It can be very expensive for you at that level.
Yes.
Professional frame shops are certainly great if you've got collectibles or you come back from holiday and you've got some art that you bought or something. That's exactly what they're there for. But if you're needing mats on a regular basis, you probably are not going to want to continue to pay full price for that. So another route is you could buy pre-cut mats, which are sold in art stores. Jerry certainly sells all different sizes and colors. You can buy ready-made frames and
Well,
put
I'll
them
stop
together
you there
also.
and say that all different colors is kind of it's hard to find the colors that you really want. And it seems like even with the ones we carry for doing my stuff, and just saying that this is why I'm so glad you're doing this, the blacks aren't the black that I would want. You know, or what's an acidfree mat may not be the full-on archival.
In case you need full archival, yeah.
So, and then that's an issue of, you know, and not everybody, and an artist like me, get excited, maybe you start your work, and then you realize this is not a standard size any longer.
And that's the problem with pre-cut mats. That everything's standard size. And if you're not working with standard size, then what do you?
Right.
That's not going to really work for you.
And then trying to take it to a shop to get somebody to do something quickly.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to come back in 2 weeks.
Because I'm the person that needs it at 2
That's
a.m.
right.
in the morning for the
That's
next
right.
day.
That's exactly right.
So this
So
is why you're
third
the
option.
savior.
That's right. So this is sort of the other
Yeah.
option that you can do
Definitely.
is by cutting your own mats. You can buy a full sheet of mat board at a Jerry's Artorama store. I'm not sure exactly what the price is, depending on which color you get, but it's a heck of a lot less than paying for a full sheet at a frame shop, and you can get a lot more mats out of it for the
Yes.
price and save a lot of money to do it that way. So this is just a third option on doing it yourself, and it's not a difficult process at all. It's actually very simple. Mat cutting equipment will pay for itself very, very quickly,
Oh, yeah.
as opposed to even buying pre-cut mats, certainly versus going to a frame counter. If you cut a few mats, if you cut a half a dozen mats, a dozen mats on a machine like this, you've probably paid for it, even if you've never used it
Oh,
again.
I agree.
So there's definitely savings to be had there. So we've got lots of different mat cutters that we make. I'm just going to hold up a brochure of the different cutters that we have. This is our cutter section here. And I'm going to be using a basic one that's up in here, but just wanted to point out that we've got a lot of different models. And sometimes that can be confusing to people. People will call us up on the phone and they say, okay,
Yes.
I'm an artist now and I am in need of a mat cutter, but you've got this enormous line of tools and I have no idea which one to buy. A lot of times people will assume that if they spend a lot more money on a mat cutter, then they'll get a machine that will never give them an overcut, or they'll never have a hook or a curve, and everything is just perfectly ready for them out of the box, and that's completely untrue. What is important to know about Logan mat cutting equipment is regardless of which mat cutter you buy from us, even if it's a handheld cutter, something like this that's about $30, $40 and use this against your own straight edge, versus our most expensive machine, the mat that comes out of these machines are going to be absolutely identical. There's no difference. There's nothing that one mat cutter on our lower range cannot do that the top range cannot do. What comes into play is the more money that you spend on a Logan mat cutter, the more features you get that will speed up the process and make things more comfortable. So you want to match the mat cutter that you're buying to the volume that you're doing.
Right.
So the kind of questions that we
Right.
get is, okay, I'm ready to buy a mat cutter, and we'll say, well, how many mats do you think in a good month, or when you're getting ready for your season? That's typically for an artist.
Right.
They'll say, well, I don't cut every month, but before the season comes up, I've got a whole bunch to cut. And we'll ask questions like, well, how many do you think you do in a good month? And do you do a lot of repeat same size mats? Or are they all different? Sometimes an artist will do a piece and they'll have it reproduced 100 times or
Right.
something, and then they'll
Right.
have 100 mats to cut. Well, that's production mat cutting.
Right.
So you'd really want to get a machine that has some sort of production mat cutting capability, because it's going to save you time. You're going to go a lot faster on that machine than you would on a machine that does not have
Right.
production stops. But say you had 25 mats to do and they were all different sizes, then you're not really going to need production stops, because
No.
you'd have to reset them constantly, and that actually makes things more
I was
complicated.
saying that in some ways may slow you down if you're
It
having
does.
to do that.
It does.
So,
So you don't have to go out and spend top money to get a machine that's going to perform beautifully for you. You just want to know an idea of what your volume is. You're welcome to call us. We get calls all day long at Logan with that exact question. We just ask some simple questions, and we may suggest, oh, somewhere in this area might be better for you, and we will suggest a couple of models so you get sort of an idea. We also have videos of all the different machines that we make on our website. I believe you can see them on the Jerry's website as well,
Yes.
where they're all listed. Really good videos. Our website and our YouTube channel has close to 100 videos, not just of the product, but there's a lot of how-tos.
Wow.
The things that we're going to do here today are all shown on video.
that's
So you
awesome.
can always go back and reference those, every step that we're going to do here today. So just, that's a good thing to remember, is that, the more money that you spend gives you a machine that gives you more sort of speed and comfort,
Right.
and maybe a little bit more accuracy over production runs of
Right.
mat cutting equipment.
Which
So-
when you're working and you're getting tired and you've been doing it a while, that really does help.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, and we don't want you to overspend, overbuy,
Right.
and we don't want you to underbuy. Because if you don't spend enough money and you're doing a lot more production, then you're being slowed down.
Right.
But if you spend a ton of money on one of our top cutters and you're only doing a handful a month, then you're wasting your money on things that you don't really need. So we really want
That's
you to buy what fits into you. So what we're going to talk about here today, this is a very basic board-mounted mat cutter that we have. It's called the 301-1. It's called the Compact Classic. The box in the store is going to look like this one right here. This has a retail price of about $149.95, I think, is retail. You can check and see what the price is on Jerry's. But this is the machine here. And I'm just going to quickly go over the different components that are involved in pretty much every mat cutter that you would buy out there. I'm going to take cutting heads off first. So these are called baseboard mounted mat cutters because we have them mounted onto a baseboard. And this is what we call like a medite fiber board. It's not grained or anything. And that's really good for being anti-warping. It doesn't generally give you a problem with warping. Although it's a good idea if you buy a mat cutter like this, when you're storing it, don't lean it up against a wall for weeks at a time.
Exactly.
Certainly if you're in a humid
Yes.
environment, don't leave it in the garage
No.
for long periods of time. If you just store it flat when you're not using it, you will never have a problem with any
Right.
one of these. So this is your baseboard right here. Most of our mat cutting equipment, really all of our board mount mat cutters, are going to have a main primary aluminum guide rail here. It's an
Okay.
extrusion that runs right down the middle of the machine. We call this the guide rail. And it's called the guide rail because the cutting heads will generally hook onto these
Okay.
things and be guided when you're cutting it. Now, on this particular level, the guide rail itself is spring-loaded.
Oh, nice.
Now, as you go up in the line, these become hinging.
Okay.
Which is a little nicer feature, and it's
Right.
all about spending a little bit more money. You get some nicer features that speed the process up.
Right.
At this level, which is really our most basic one, you get a spring-loaded guide rail, and underneath here is where you're going to put your material. Whether you're cutting mat board or foam board, everything's going to go right underneath here. You also have what's called a mat guide. That's the other bar out here. Now, this is held in place with two black knobs. If you loosen these, this will slide back and forth in the base of the machine.
Okay.
And we have a scale right here. And the scale is going to denote how thick your borders are. So sometimes people might get confused and they say, well, is this where you set your opening? Well, yes and no. You're not really setting, you're not setting this for a 5x7 because
Right,
you want a
right.
5x7 opening. You're actually going to set the width of how wide the borders are going to be on your
Okay.
mat. So for instance, if you set it at 3 inches right here and cut a mat on all 4 sides, you're going to have a 3-inch border. It doesn't matter if it's a small piece of mat board or a giant piece of mat
Okay.
board. You're going to have a 3-inch all the way around. Now, when you set your mat guide, there's a sticker here. It's upside down this direction. I'll flip it over so you can see it better. It says set scale, and the arrows are sort of pointing out this direction. So that's telling you that you're going to be setting the scale out over on this side here. So if I was going to be doing a 3-inch border, here's my 3-inch mark right there where the red line is. I would just sort of park this right over the top. You want to kind of try to split that line in half whenever you're setting scales on a mat cutter. That way you're nice and consistent. Now do notice also that the scale is metric on the one side and it is inches on the other. So because we sell these all over the world, you're welcome to use whatever side you want to use. Again, just be consistent. So right now we would have this set for a 3-inch border. That's the baseboard. Now every one of our mat cutters are going to come with 2 cutting tools. One is going to be a straight cutter that will cut at essentially a 90-degree angle. It's
Okay.
used to downsize mat board, foam board, whatever it is. It's referred to as blanket board to size.
right,
You're
right.
going to use a straight cutter. The other tool that comes with it is going to be your bevel cutter. And this is the one that puts the nice angled openings into the
Right.
machine here. Now on this level of equipment, the straight cutter that you get is what we call a mat knife. And this is essentially nothing more than kind of like a utility knife. You can install, there's actually not a blade in here now, I'm not going to need to use it today. But you would put a blade on this and you could set it to 2 different depth settings, either for mat board or for 3/16 foam board. And the reason why all of our tools will cut at least 3/16 foam board is because we know that you're going to need to cut 3/16 foam board. That's typically the last piece of material that drops into the back of the frame.
Right.
The backing is usually 3/16 foam board. So this will cut 3/16. So you would set the depth to wherever it needs to be. Your material would go under the rail, and you could pull your mat knife right along the side of the guide rail, and that downsizes your material, or sometimes it's referred to blanking a board to size. So that's your straight cutter. Now, as you go up in our line, the straight cutter, instead of being a handheld knife, it's more of a cutting head that will hook onto the side of the rail.
Where it's
with a
got the
vertical-
handle on it.
It's got the handle.
Okay,
So
all
it
right,
looks like
that's
a
what
bike
that
handle.
is. Yeah, yeah.
They don't really perform any different when you use one or the other, but it's nicer, it's more comfortable to use the nicer one. So
Yes.
again, if you spend a little bit more money.
Right, I
you
can
get
see
some
where that would
nicer
help with
features.
production.
Yeah.
Just easier to
It's
kind
more
of pull it
comfortable
out.
certainly
Yes.
to use but this works just fine.
Right,
So if
right,
your
right.
volume's low, this one's actually just fine
Right.
for you. So this is the real important one. This is your bevel cutter that cuts the beveled openings. So the blade is installed and it's right in the front here. And you notice if I push down on the blade holder here, this will sort of pop back up again, but a little bit of the blade is coming out right out the bottom when you depress down on the blade holder here. So this is called a blade holder, and it does have sort of a return spring action in it. Now sometimes people will confuse that and believe that after they make a cut, the blade is supposed to auto retract. But it's not. That's not why the spring is there, actually. The spring is there so when I'm not using the cutting head and it's on my nice,
Yes.
my nice oak dining table or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
gravity isn't going to allow this blade to fall down and cut
Yes.
into something. So it's only there to hold this up in a neutral position when you're not using it. But this is where your blade is. The cutting head also has these nylon clips, and they're sort of slotted. You can see on the bottom. You can see where that's at. And these slotted clips, they allow you to take the cutting head, and it will hook right onto the side of the guide rail of this machine. It'll slide a little bit better with the slip sheet underneath it. So it slides right on the side of the machine. So these little nylon guides are a great thing to have because you're not having to push the cutting head up against the rail to make a cut. You simply just push forward
Right.
and it'll track itself automatically, which is a nice feature.
Nice.
We also have a start and stop indicator on the back, this little silver line. That's the most important part that tells you where to start and stop on your marked lines. One other quick thing about the blade, if you notice here, the blade is actually passing through a slot that's cut very thin through the aluminum. And that's a special thing that only Logan offers. And what that does, the advantage of that, it's called the Logan blade slot, is it essentially squeezes the blade from both sides when it comes through the cutting head and helps prevent it from flexing. Because if the blade flexes on you when you're cutting,
You get a little
you're going to get a hook or a curve.
squiggle, yeah.
Yep, so that's a real good advantage to have. If you have to adjust your blade depth, there's a screw on the bottom there. We're going to talk about that just in a second. So this last thing I'm going to talk about, this is a strip of mat board that's going to come with all the mat cutters that we make, any of the board mounted mat cutters. This is called a slip sheet. This is just a scrap piece of mat board. It's very, very important that a slip sheet is in the machine whenever you're making a bevel cut. Like for instance, this is a finished bevel mat that I cut a little while ago. The opening's already dropped out of it. On the back are the lines, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. So whenever you're doing a bevel cut, like when I was cutting this mat, it's very important that I have this scrap mat board in the machine underneath the mat that I'm cutting. And what that does is because the bevel cutter is starting its cut by pushing into the back of the mat and then making a cut and pull out, you have to support the face paper on the other side. And you do that with a scrap piece of mat board. So you absolutely have to have that in there. Sometimes people will say, can I use that self-healing kind of green?
The
you
mats.
can't do it because it's really dense rubber and the blade might chip
Right.
break off or something like that. So really important that this stays in when you're bevel cutting. However, when you're using a straight cutter like this, if I was cutting this in half, you would remove the slip sheet. Because a straight cutter is not punching into the back to make its cut, it's just cutting from edge to edge.
Right.
So really important that you use this when you're bevel cutting.
That's brilliant.
And as this gets chewed up, you gotta switch it around.
My failed matting attempts now make so much more
Yeah.
sense. It
Yeah.
was not a Logan mat cutter that I learned, tried, failed, said forget it on. So
It's a really important,
yeah, this
really,
is
really
very
important thing.
impressive. So
Yep. So as this wears out too, you're gonna eventually have to replace this. So what I tell a lot of people do too is if you have a frame shop that you ever visit, sometimes the framer will be selling cutoffs in a bucket on the floor or something like that.
they may just give you
Buy 'em.
scraps.
Or they may even give you scraps,
Yeah.
that's even better.
Yeah, I think most of our frame shops sell scraps and stuff on the
Yeah,
side.
and you should get those because that, if nothing else, you can use that as a slip sheet. Or if you've cut a large mat and the window drops out, you don't know what to do with that dropout, use it as a slip sheet. It's a great thing to
Nice.
use. So, okay, so we've talked about the components. You could hand me one of those top white pieces of mat board. I'm going to go ahead and cut an opening in the mat just to show how the process goes. Okay. So this is an 11 by 14 blank, regular, like a 4-ply type mat board. A lot of standard mat board is a 4-ply like this. It has they typically have like a back layer, and then they have a core. They'll have a top layer, and then they'll have whatever color this is. And this is sort of an eggshell type of color on this particular one. This is buffered acid-free mat board, and what that means, it's got a buffering agent in there that will essentially neutralize the acid. So even though that there's technically acid in here, it's not going to do anything, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're for 90% of what artists are framing at home, buffered acid-free mat board is fine. There is completely acid-free mat board, sometimes referred to as rag or archival mat board. That costs a lot more. That is naturally acid-free because it comes from cotton. It can be a little bit more tricky to cut, especially if you're cutting like an 8-ply. But if you have something that has some real value that you're just going to, planning to leave on a frame for the next century or two, then you may want to consider that. But my point is don't be scared of using this buffered acid-free mat board. It comes in lots of different colors. It's relatively inexpensive, and it comes in a 32 by 40 sheet, so you can get a lot of outs on that. So what we have right here is an 11 by 14, which I'm going to use in my compact. Now this compact mat cutter, this is a 32-inch capacity machine, which means the distance between these two hinges here is 32 inches. So if you have one of our compact mat cutters, that means the 32-inch side could go through the machine, but not the 40.
Right.
If you had to do a cut on the 40, you'd have to do that on the outside and then continue on in your mat cutter. So if you think your production would call for that, then it's a good idea to move up to a 40-inch machine.
And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember exactly from framing in a store that I was at before. Mat board comes in 32 by 40 and 40 by 60.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
That's
Okay.
oversized. You
Okay.
can 40 by 60. Some of our machines we make are in 60-inch capacity for people who are going to do, yeah. Because sometimes people are doing, say, like panoramic
Right,
photography,
right.
and they need to work
Oh.
with 40 by 60.
Yeah.
However, sometimes people will call us and say, okay, I want this machine, but I'm definitely going to buy the 60-inch version, so I know I've got a big enough machine for anything I want to cut. And I sort of say, well, if you don't think you're going to cut 60-inch, I wouldn't necessarily go out and buy a 60-inch.
that's a lot.
It's a lot of extra. It's a lot more bar to lift up
Yeah.
and down every day.
Yeah.
So, but they are available, and you're
Right.
absolutely right.
Okay.
40 by 60 is the other size. So to cut a simple mat in this, first of all, we're always going to make sure that our slip sheet is in the machine, and it is. We're going to set the mat guide here to a border size, and I set it at 3 inches. I think that's what I'm going to go with. But if I had to reset it, I can just loosen these knobs. This slides back and forth. I'm going to find my 3-inch mark there. Just sort of split that line in half. When you tighten these two black knobs here, then this pulls itself parallel to your guide rail, so you know you're going to have a nice straight
Right.
sort of cut here. Okay, so the mat board here, our blank, it goes in collar side down. So all I have to do is just sort of lift up on this guide rail. Remember, it's kind of spring loaded. Goes all the way in until it's nice and flush right up against your mat
Right.
guide here. Typically, you're going to use a pencil to mark your lines out. On the right-hand side of the guide rail, you're going to draw a line the full length. And when you're holding your pencil
On the back.
on the back, absolutely. Yeah. You don't do it on
Because
the
that was
front.
Amy's first time matting. Oh, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works much better if you do it from the back. I'd say 90% of our equipment is designed to cut from the back. You know, one of the big reasons why we don't make anything that cuts in the front, because you don't want any friction or anything.
Oh,
You
yeah,
don't want
yeah.
the tool scraping
No,
over the,
exactly.
the good side of the mat. So when I'm holding my pencil here to do this, I kind of hold it at about a 45-degree angle, because I want to make sure the pencil lead is getting right down against the bottom of the aluminum right there. So I'm going to mark all 4 of my lines. Go clear edge to edge, right past you in the corners. And then your mat will look like this. And we're doing an even 3-inch border. So this is the back of the mat. Okay, to actually make the cut, I'm just going to turn the machine a little bit sideways here so you can see what I'm doing.
I can stand over here so I can see, because
Okay.
now I'm fascinated.
Ideally, when you're using a board-mounted mat cutter like this, you want to stand so that the machine is running straight away from you like it is from me here. That way you're either pushing the tool straight away or you're pulling them directly towards yourself. You never really want to stand on the side and slide things left or right,
Right.
because you have a tendency of doing this with your wrist, and if the cutting head moves, then your blade's moving and you're going to have a problem here. So again, the little clips allow the cutting head to hook right onto the rail. Here's my start and stop indicator. And I put it right over the top of my bottom line right there.
Nice.
This is a push style cutter, so I'm going to start on my near line with this type of cutter and put the blade in, and I'm going to cut to the far line and then take the blade out. So I'm ready to cut. I sort of hold the cutting head still with my left hand. Just put some pressure here so that it can't move anywhere as the blade goes in. Then you take your thumb and you've got this nice area on the top of the blade holder here. Just give that a good sharp push to get the blade all the way in. Now the blade's down, so here, next step is you're going to put your left hand on the guide rail, put a little bit of pressure here so nothing slides away from you. And you can kind of drop your wrist and keep your eye on this line here and push. And when you get to your far line, you can see where I've stopped. Now it's very important when you finish your cut that you always pop the blade out. You don't leave the blade down, because if you do and you pull the mat out, you're going to tear out your corner. You're going to have to start over. So that's one cut. So I'm going to turn it a quarter turn. And again, I'm going to line up my 2 lines. Just like that. I hold the cutting head still, take my thumb, put the blade all the way in, put a little bit of pressure down here so nothing slides away on me. Cut straight ahead, and when I get to the other line, right on top of it, pop your blade out. We're about halfway done with that mat
nice.
right there.
It's like he's done it before.
It looks so easy.
I know.
I've done it a couple of times before in the last 25 years, that's true.
No.
You want to cut the last one?
Oh, God.
No pressure.
You certainly can if you'd like to. I'll let you come around here and do the last side.
So I get to do this righty style.
Are you left-handed?
Yeah, that's okay.
You know, I've
I'm
done a
used
lot
to-
of workshops.
I'm used to,
But Amy, you cut left-handed. I mean, you cut right-handed.
yeah, I do.
Usually I see
technically-
left-handed people always figure out a way.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've never had a
They have
left-handed
to.
person say that I can't do this. They've always figured out how to do it. Give it a good sharp
Okay.
push down. Yep. Make sure the blade's all the way in. Leave pressure with your thumb.
Okay.
Put a little bit of pressure down here with your hands. And kind of drop your wrist a little bit and just push forward, just like that. And then you're going to stop right over your line there. Yep. Kind of pop the blade up. That should be it.
Ta-da!
That should be a finished mat. So let's pull that out of there and see if it all drops out.
Well, look at that.
little tiny bit of
yep,
hang
that
up in
was
the
me.
corner. That's okay. You know, and when you first start cutting, you have to learn exactly how to start and
Yeah.
stop over the top of the lines to get your best cut. But there's your
Does
there's
such
your
a
four
nice
sides
job.
right here.
Yeah. And you can feel it go through, so you can tell exactly when it's gone through.
It's very important that you keep, just like as you
Yep.
did, you want to make sure that you keep your thumb down
Yep.
on that. Don't let your thumb off of this, otherwise the blade will back out. If you keep pressure consistent all the way through, you'll get a nice mat like this. We're working on an excellent table here too. The kind of table you want to use is something that's got a nice sturdy top, and preferably for most people, you're going to want something higher than a regular tabletop height, something like a countertop. You get a lot more leverage that way. Don't use like, you know, a card table or
Right, yeah,
something
yeah,
that's wobbly.
yeah,
Because then that means
exactly.
when you push down, the board
Yeah.
can wobble. So this
And
is
probably to do something that's up and kind of close to your work surface rather than
absolutely
really low or super high where you're not getting.
yeah. Certainly for me, I like to work on a
yeah.
on a table. Otherwise, I'd kill my back after a little while on a lower
I can
one,
imagine.
So we've got a mat cut here. Usually what I would do is you want to look right at your corners and see what kind of performance you're getting. You don't want to have any overcuts in your corners. You don't want to see any hooks or curves in your corners. And you don't want to see a long curve on the length of the cut either. If you have any of those things, that's a problem. If it's jumping out and you can see it, you're probably not going to be happy with the mat. So to look and see if you have any overcuts, you just want to look at your corners and see, you know, do you have any areas where the blade has gone physically far past the
Yeah.
corner where you can see it? I can see a little bit of an overcut
Only where
here,
you
but
do it.
it's not bad at all. And when you first start out, that's not actually unusual at all because the blade has not really been quite
Right.
set to what you're cutting. So you want to look and see if you're getting an overcut in your corners and you're sure that you started and stopped on your lines like you're supposed to, then, well, what did you do wrong? Well, you probably did nothing wrong. More than likely your issue is you have too much blade coming out the bottom of the cutting head.
Okay.
And if there's more blade that is needed to come out the bottom of the cutting head, then the cut starts too soon and it stops too late.
Okay.
And that results as an overcut.
That makes sense.
So you just want to reduce it a little bit. So you can take a screwdriver and you can just adjust this a little bit on the underside here. Turn the
okay.
screw in, it will decrease the depth. If you turn it out, it will increase the depth. So if
Nice.
you're not getting through,
Sounds
obviously
like a
you
table
need more.
saw blade.
It's very much like a
Right?
table saw
Yeah,
blade, the way it raises
that's
and
what I was
lowers.
thinking doing that. This is going to be so much harder than using a table saw.
If you had any hooks or curves in your corners either, your corners should be nice, crisp looking 90 degree.
Right.
And same thing, if you had a little bit of hook in the corner, it's probably because you have too much blade depth out, so the
Okay.
blade is flexing on you. So check the blade depth. A good way to know what kind of blade depth you have, if it's accurate, is look at your slip sheet. Because all you want to be
yeah.
doing here is just
Barely
barely
putting a line
scoring
in.
into it. Right,
Okay.
exactly. Just scoring. I mean, if you're cutting even halfway through this, after you cut through your mat, then you have entirely too much blade.
Right.
So you want to adjust it so you're just slicing into the top of this, just right here.
Now then also can you have kind of by the same reasoning when the blade starts getting dull, can you have the same type of issues as well? Or do you find
Yes.
that there's more drag and so it's not
That's an excellent
creating as
question.
clean of a cut?
Yeah, a dull blade will definitely give you more drag. And a
Okay.
dull blade is typically not going to want to cut straight, so it will flare out when you first plunge it
okay.
into the mat, and then it will straighten itself, and that'll show up as a hook.
Okay.
So how often do you change blades?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably one of the most popular questions that I'm asked. And
Mm-hmm.
people will say, how long does the blade last? Well, I can't tell you unless you were to tell me how big is your mat.
Right.
You know, are you doing a full
Right,
size
yeah, if you're doing those
32/40?
60-inch mats.
Well, then yeah, you might get one per
Right,
mat.
right.
But if you're doing a smaller mat like 5x7s, you can probably do a lot more. This was a brand new blade. This was an 11x14 with a somewhere around 8x10 opening. I would think for sure you could probably do at least 8 of these openings.
Oh, wow, that's-
Maybe 10 on one side
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
blade. And then after that, you're going to probably, in fact, once you own a machine, you're going to get used to
You'd be able
what
to
it
feel
feels
it.
like.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you won't even let it get to that point. You're going to know, okay, this blade's getting
Right.
a little bit dull. I always tell people too, if you're starting a new project and you haven't used your cutter in a while, the first thing you should do is put a new blade into the machine because the blades are inexpensive compared
Right.
to a full sheet of mat board.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If you ruin your mat board because you
Yep.
didn't change your blade that costs about 25 cents, you're going to be
Right.
upset with yourself too. So,
Right.
and a really nice feature about most of the equipment that we make are these blades are reversible.
Right.
So
That's
you can
fantastic.
Take them out, flip them around, and put them back in the other
Yeah,
direction.
so for 100 blades, you're getting
You're
200.
actually getting 200 ends.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a good way to definitely think about that. So that's a good thing to know about on how to control overcuts or hooks and curves. Usually when I talk about this, then from now on, people, when they walk into a gallery, they don't even look at the art. The first thing that they do is they start looking at the corners, because nobody was really paying attention before until they start to
Yeah.
learn about what an
Yeah.
overcut is. And sometimes you will see some things that are just horrible, and
Oh, I bet.
you wonder why they accepted that. But you know, if you know how to adjust your blade depth and change your blade on a regular basis, you can have perfect looking corners on our least expensive machines to our top level machines. There's really no difference at all. So there's just a standard mat for you. The next thing we're going to do is actually cut a mat that has an opening that means something,
Okay.
which is sort of the some of the area of mat cutting that people sometimes get a little bit worked up about, because they're afraid there's some math involved and they don't know how to do the
Yeah.
math and stuff. So I've got a technique that I think is pretty easy that I was taught a long time ago. I'm going to use this piece of art here. So the next mat that we're going to cut is actually going to have an opening that will fit this perfectly. So this is a piece of 8x10 art. I don't know if that's kind of an abstract, oceany looking. I believe that's the top, and this is
Yeah,
the bottom here.
that looks right.
So this is my piece of art, and I'm going to mat it into an 11x14 here. So how do you figure out how to perfectly center it? Okay, the technique that I was taught that I think is pretty darn easy. Get yourself a ruler, a decent ruler, and take care of it. Don't get a cheap one, get a nice decent one, take care of it. Now, when you're going to cut an opening for a piece of artwork, certainly a piece like this is like a full bleed, which means the image goes all the way to the outside edges. We're not worried about any kind of border or anything. You may have that. If you have that, that's no problem. You just measure to what you want to see or what you don't want to see. And when you measure an opening for a piece of artwork, the opening has to be a little bit smaller than the artwork. So if this
Thank
is,
you for saying that, because
Yeah.
you don't even know how many people, yeah.
you can't cut an 8x10 opening for an 8x10 piece of artwork. because it will
There's people
fall
that'll
through.
try.
Yeah, it'll fall
Yes.
through.
Yes.
Typically, what is done is it's about a ½ inch difference, and that gives you an extra quarter inch all the way
Right.
around to hold everything. So if this was an 8x10, which it is, and I don't want to lose any more of the artwork, I have to, but I also have to cut an opening that's slightly smaller. What I do is I start and I put my 0 point on the ruler, not necessarily the end of the ruler, but figure out where your 0 point is, where the measurements actually start. And I'm going to park that, to me, what looks like just about a ½ inch in from the outside edge. Don't worry about if it's exactly a quarter
Right.
inch. Just pick what you look like a ½ inch. Put your 0 point there, and look across the ruler and find a matching number that lands about a ½ inch from the other side. And of course, this is an 8x10, so I'm measuring 9.5, which looks like it starts in about a quarter on both sides. So this
Right.
one's pretty simple. But this works for any kind of piece of artwork that you have. This is called measuring your viewable area of your art. Whatever is inside the numbers that you're looking at here that you've decided is what you're going to see. If it's on the outside of those numbers, you're not going to see it. So we're doing a 9.5 inch. So you want to flip the first
Yes.
sign over, Amy? Well, I got a couple of visuals here to
Let's
sort of
have-
help.
You got any Vanna White?
I am. All right, so we're doing this.
This one first, yep. So just as a representation of what I'm doing. That's really nice. So you can see this is the artwork here, and what I've done is I've measured 9.5 inches across, kind of like I show here, because we have to come in about a ½ inch on each side,
Right.
so it doesn't fall through. And then I do a vertical number 2, and if I laid my ruler across here and I start with the 0 point about a ½ inch in and pick a matching number at the top, comes to me it's 7.5 by 9.5, which naturally would be a perfect opening for an 8x10. So we know what our opening sizes are. What I usually do is I will write those on the back of the blank
Yes.
of the mat as I'm going along. So I know that I got a 9.5 and I've got a 7.5. So now we're going to do math. The next sign thing here I have sort of shows the math the way it's done. So we have 7.5 by 9.5 going into an 11 by 14 piece of mat board. So this is how you do the math. Is here's 14, which is the full length of our piece of mat board here. We've measured 9.5 going this direction. So if you subtract 9.5 from 14, that leaves over 4.5 inches. Immediately divide that 4.5 inches by 2 because you have 2 borders. You got one here and you have one here. So 4.5 divided by 2 is 2.25 for your left and right borders. So that tells me that this side and this side are going to be 2.25. That's about as simple as I can do it. So I immediately write border
I'm
sizes.
following this, and it's math.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. You know, one thing too that I also bring up too is not always in the world of matting and framing are you going to land on such convenient numbers.
Right, right. Very true.
Sometimes you get some things that land on, you know, 8s or 16s.
Right, or
something
somebody has a
like
custom,
that.
some weird antique custom frame, and
And it's a little more difficult to do the
Yes.
math. So
Right.
the suggestion that I make is if you can use what I sort of call as a decimal cheat sheet. And what this is, this represents 1 inch in fraction and in decimal. So if I had a strange set of numbers that I didn't know how to calculate in my head, I could look and I could turn that fraction temporarily into a decimal point, so I can do the math on a calculator. And when I've figured out what my border sizes are in decimal, I turn it back into the fraction so I know where to set my
That's-
math guide.
that's brilliant.
So essentially, it just sort of temporarily takes your math and turns it from a fraction temporarily
Right.
into a decimal so that you can use a calculator.
Right.
And you turn it back into a fraction,
yeah.
so then you can set your math guide. So you can find a sort of a decimal fraction comparison like this anywhere on the internet. You can find these. This is simply just 1 inch from 0 to 1 in both fraction and decimal. So sometimes that comes in really, really handy.
Oh, I bet.
If you don't have a piece of art that is as cooperative as this one is right here, but this one's pretty good. So we figured out that we have 2.5 or 2 1/4 inch borders on this side and this side. So I wrote that on the back. The other direction we had measured on this piece of art going this way was 7.5, and that's going to go into an 11-inch side of our mat board. So if we take 11 minus 7.5, what's left over is 3.5. Immediately divide that by 2, and you have 1.75, which of course is 1 3/4.
Right.
If you didn't know what that was, you could look at your cheat sheet and know that 175 is 1 3/4. So now we know that the top and the bottom are going to be 1 3/4 and 1 3/4. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to write 1 3/4 and 1. I write these on the back, so then I can't get confused. When I'm ready to
Right.
set my mat guide, all I have to do is look right down, and it tells me
Right.
where to set it. So all my math is done now. I'm ready to cut these 4 borders. And it doesn't matter which sides you want to do first. I'll do the 1 3/4 on the top and bottom here first.
I think it's so funny, you don't think about being able to write on the back of it when it's so helpful. Like, nobody's
Sure.
gonna see it.
Right.
Exactly my point. Nobody's going to see it.
That's what I said with that grid. I
In
was
fact, I
like,
think the
I
next
wonder
sign
how many
actually
I would ruin
shows the
before
mat.
realized
I think I have one more.
There we go.
Yep, that's the
Oh.
borders I'm going to cut. They're right there. That's essentially what I wrote on the back of the mat of those sizes. After I took my viewable art size and I subtracted it into the distance that it was going into and divided the remainder by 2. That tells me what my borders are. So I've got this set for 1 3/4 first. I'll go ahead and mark those borders out.
Put my Vanna ink Frida.
Now you do have to mark all 4 borders before you can start cutting, so I can't start cutting quite yet. I gotta go ahead and get these marked also. So these are 2 1/4 and 2 1/4. So I reset my mat guide out here.
Yes,
so easy
do
to
all
change.
4 before you start
Yeah,
cutting.
That's right. You can't start cutting till they're all marked. And then I mark out my my 2 1/4 and my 2 1/4. All right, so we're all marked out. Now, the thing to remember is make sure that you adjust your mat guide from the different border sizes as necessary. Don't leave the mat guide in its
Right.
position and cut all 4 sides, because
Right.
you're not going to have the
Yep.
right mat. But it does make sense to cut a border and then cut the other opposite one while
Right.
it's still sitting there. It
Right.
saves you time. So it's right now it's sitting at the 2 1/4. I'm going to leave it right where it is. Same process here. We hook the cutting head on. I've got my pencil mark lined up with my start and stop indicator. I sort of hold this still with one hand, get the blade all the way in, put some pressure down. I cut from line to line. Now I got to turn it all the way around to do the other 2 1/4. Again, get the blade in. Cut from line to line. All right, now the 2 sides that I have left are 1 3/4 and 1 3/4. So here's where you got to remember to reset your mat guide. The other thing that you might do, maybe the first time when you do this, is you may accidentally write the wrong borders on the wrong sides, and where you reverse them. And if you go ahead and cut your mat, well,
You'll
technically
find
will,
out pretty quick.
Yeah, it's not going to look right. It'll actually, the mat will line up nicely in the opening, but the opening will be going the wrong distance,
yeah.
the wrong direction of the mat. You're going to know right away that you've done something wrong. Typically, you do that once.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then you learn from then on, and it never happens again.
And then you better make some weird shaped art. To
Yeah,
use that math.
if you can still salvage it. Yep.
Mistakes are the best teacher.
Yep.
Okay. I got one side left to cut. Again, I got my 2 lines lined up. Get the blade all the way down, put some pressure here. Cut to the far line, stop. And then here's our mat. Now here's where we check.
Oh, yeah.
Here's where we check and see if we did our math right. So here's our piece of artwork. And that should
Perfect.
look nice and even. And it's only about a 1/4 inch all the way around that we had to sacrifice in order for this to hold in. Because remember, if we would have cut it an exact 8 by 10,
Right, it
then
would
this
have
could fall
fallen right through.
Exactly. So I think this looks pretty good. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a simple, what's called T-hinge mounting, to mount this piece of artwork into the back of the mat here. So to do that, set your mat aside so you don't lose track of it. Here's a piece of artwork. You want to flip it so it's face over, kind of clean off an area on your workstation here. Flip it so it's face over, and stay mindful of what the top edge of the mat or the image is. So make sure that this is the top. My first 2 pieces of tape I'm going to put here. Now this tape that I'm using, this is called, it's a Logan product. This is a hinging tape, sometimes called framer's tape. What I'm using here is a self-adhesive, which means I'm going to pull the backing off of here, and then it sticks down. And I happen to like Logan the best, although I think there's some other brands out there. It's absolutely available through Jerry's. I think this is $15, $17 a box. You can mount a ton of artwork with this. So this technique that I'm showing you is a very good all-purpose way of mounting posters, photographs, pastel, pencil,
Right.
watercolor. This is a really good all-purpose way. What we're going to do is the first 2 pieces are going to go on like this. They're going to be about half on and half off the art. One on the left and one over to the right. It's not real scientific on the math or anything. Just pick one over to the left, one over to the right. Now you have to get the backing off of this, and I find the easiest way is the outside of it's a little bit more abrasive. And if you fold a corner over like this in your thumb and your finger, and then kind of give it a pinch like this, then it will pull the backing away from the paper. And then here's your tape. So just lightly apply it, sticky side down. One on the right, same thing on this one here. I'm just going to fold a corner over. This stuff too, you have to use scissors when you cut this. You can't tear this stuff, so I always make sure I have a pair of scissors around when I'm going to do some T-hinge mounting. Again, just sort of peel it apart. And take another piece. Okay, so as you can see, we've got 2 pieces on the top edge, sticky side down. Now I'm going to flip the art over. And this is the time when if you're sitting down, you're going to want to stand up because you want to have to look straight down.
Definitely.
And here's where the moment where we're going to actually lower this down and make sure that it's nice and framed nice and easily, nice and square and even. And if it looks good, sometimes your first inclination here is to go like this.
Right, yeah, no, don't do that.
Don't do that. Because you don't want to be rubbing your
Hand
hands on
oil
the good
everywhere.
side.
Yep.
In fact, sometimes at this point here, framers, and it's not a bad idea, you can get some cotton framing gloves. And
Yep.
at this point on, wear those gloves because they tend to keep static down and they keep dirt or any oil from your fingers on and off. So it's not a bad idea. Regardless, when you first get them to touch, just lightly let them tack and carefully flip it over, and then you work the tape in from the back.
Right.
So don't be putting pressure on the front side. That's not really the better way to do it. So now we're up to this point right here where it's just hinging in from the top. The next 2 pieces are going to cross our first 2, just like this, right along the top of the art, not on the art.
Right.
We're not going to have it down here anywhere. It's going to be right along the top
Little
edge.
insurance is what I call it.
Just reinforcing the tape.
Yep.
the
That's
whole
exactly
time.
what we're doing. We're reinforcing the hinges, is all that these other 2 cross pieces
Yep,
are
because
gonna
gravity's
do.
going to want to, over time, potentially pull that down with the weight of the artwork. That keeps that from happening. That stuff
So?
works, that type works fantastic with prints
Take the second
on
piece off.
Stonehenge and wreaths, stuff like that. Because the texture of the paper sometimes doesn't want to stick with other tapes, and that tape works fantastic with it.
Now I've got my second piece. Again, I'm crossing right at the top. Work all your tape in. And then the artwork just sort of hangs in your mat like this. And this is all the tape we're going to use.
Yep.
No more tape. You do not tape.
And if they've missed the ones with Sam that explain why, it's because things will still expand and contract just slightly.
Absolutely correct.
Taping all the way around, you could tear your artwork, you
That's
could
exactly right.
make it bow, you could do all sorts of things. This
That's right.
allows it to hang properly with gravity.
You have two different sort of components here, the mat board and then the art, which are in two different sorts of paper types, and they will
Right.
expand and contract at slightly different rates. Certainly if you've got, the sun comes through the window and hits your painting or something like that, or even humidity or something like that. Sometimes you may go to a gallery or something and you may see a piece of art and it's all buckled like this. That could be because somebody has taped all four sides. It could be.
Yes.
So you do not want to put any more tape on this. And the tape we want to use is like what we're using here, because this won't dry out, it's acid-free. Technically, you can remove this. It actually can be removed. Say 10 years down the road, you're redoing your living room colors and you want to rematch your pieces. Well, you can carefully peel this off.
Right.
It comes right off, then the piece of artwork is essentially the way it was when you bought it. It's ready to be remounted. However, there is another version of this, which is water activated. It's a little more friendly for archival use, because the way that works is instead of a backing that comes off the back, you sort of dip the pieces through a bowl of water.
It's gummed.
And then exactly, it's pretty sort of adhesive. Then you can set up your hinges and let them dry.
Don't lick it, it's gross. It's worse than old stamps.
The adhesive.
Don't ask
Yeah.
how I know that.
Oh, is
What
it
were you
the
tasting it for?
It's just
I don't think I've ever tasted
doing
it
something
before.
at 2 or 3 in the morning going, I don't have a sponge.
The good thing about the water activated stuff, though, is like we said, say 10 years down
Yeah.
the road, you want to change it.
Right.
Take like a damp sponge.
Re-wet, yep.
Just wet them
Comes
and they
right
loosen
off.
up. It comes right off. It's like nothing was touching it
Right.
again. And the whole purpose again of really of matting is you're archiving a piece of artwork in a state that it will not be altered. That
Right.
it can be preserved. It's preserved under UV glass or plexi. That way you can look at it, but it's also being sort of preserved in its current state. And that's really what the whole point of matting and framing is. So at this point, this is ready to go in. And again, this T-hinge mounting, and the reason why it's called T is if you notice, it sort of makes the shape of the letter T's
Right.
on the back here, and that's somebody cleverly called that T-hinge mounting. So you can use this kind of mounting for, a lot of all-purpose stuff. You certainly can use it for photography and watercolor pieces. But, typically only 2 pieces. Sometimes people say if it's a really big piece, should I do 3? No, you still want to do 2. If you're mounting a poster, sometimes instead of using tape, you may want to have it dry mounted, like what a framer
Right.
would do for you, where it lays onto a piece of foam board with sort of an adhesive tissue.
Right.
It heats up and there's a
yes,
vacuum.
if it's not an artwork piece.
If it's not something collectible
Once
or
it's
valuable.
on,
That's true.
it's not coming off.
That's true. If you dry mount, it becomes part of that foam
Yes.
board for the rest of eternity. So
Yes.
I was told a framer told me once, when in doubt, don't dry mount.
Yeah.
Because it could be that you got to make real sure that you're willing to allow that to happen. This
Right.
gives you flexibility that you can undo it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Which is really
or
nice.
even especially, you don't want to limit people that buy your artwork from, let's say you buy one color because you get a good deal on cream or white or something. Not everybody's going to want this color that you've matted your stuff in for the art shows or whatever.
right.
For your booth. A lot of times for a booth, you just want them to kind of all match rather than a bunch of crazy colors. They can go and have this
That's right.
redone by a professional
Yeah, that's right.
to match something in their living room, to match a certain color
right.
they like, and it's done right. They're not taking their artwork there and the framer's saying,
Yeah,
Who did this?
Yeah, the framer will look at it.
Yes.
They know they've got options.
or
They can
damage
undo
it potentially because there's no way to get it off.
That's right. And that's why you never use anything like masking tape or
Yes,
scotch
Scotch tape.
For God's sakes, don't ever do
No.
that. That will burn your picture.
Yes.
It will dry out and fall off
In short
anyway.
order too.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't take that long.
Doesn't take long at all. So using a proper hinging tape is definitely the right way to go. So we've got this hinged now. Now we're ready to build it into a frame.
Right.
If you want to hand me the frame there.
Yes.
And I think you've got a piece of plexi that's
I
pretty
do.
sized for
Oh,
me
Amanda has a
also.
question.
While
Sure.
we're at a transition,
Okay.
Elizabeth Joseph has a question.
Yes.
She said, in school, I was taught to cut mats 3 inches around the sides and top and the bottom edge at 3.5. It's
Yes.
supposed to lend weight to the artwork.
Right.
Is that a good practice or?
Okay, the question was if you were cutting a mat, should you intentionally make the bottom border thicker than the other sides? That is entirely up to you. That process is typically called a weighted border. The most common time you will see a weighted border is on a larger landscape piece like a watercolor, which is typically going to be a landscape direction on your wall. What happens is when you have 4 borders that are similar in size on a large landscape piece and you put it on the wall, your eye sort of tricks you when you stand back and it looks like the bottom border is thinner.
Right.
It looks like it's thinner than the other ones. It's not, but it looks like it's thinner.
Right.
So what a framer would do would be to pad that bottom. They would take some number away from here, maybe a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch from this number, and add it to here. The best way to do that is do all your math first, as if you were going to put it directly dead center. Don't try to do it all on the fly, you'll probably get
Right.
confused.
Right.
Do like we did and make your exact in the middle. Before you actually start marking lines and cutting though, say I've got a 1 3 and 1 3/4 and 1 3/4 here, maybe I want to turn this into a 1 1/2 and then add that 1/2 inch.
Right.
Or that 1/4 inch difference into here, and that will make this one a little bit thicker.
Well, even over time, I think when you've got something in, especially like where you've put the little kind of spring clips or something in, this is the same, but gravity will kind of pull it down.
Yeah, it
and
can.
because that's designed to have a little bit of play, it
can-
does,
it can make it look thinner.
it gives that look, yeah, sometimes, so.
So the real traditional purpose of a weighted border is you shouldn't see that the bottom is weighted. When you
Right.
step back and look, nothing jumps out and
Right,
tells you that it doesn't
right.
look right. That's the true definition of a weighted border. However, sometimes you may see, a lot of times like on black and white photography, you'll see where a
Yes.
framer has intentionally done a dramatic thick border on the bottom, maybe a 4-inch, 6-inch
Right, right.
bottom on the border, where a small black and white picture is in the upper area of a larger piece of mat. That's not technically a weighted border, it's sort of, we call them gallery style or
Right,
something. And
right,
again,
right.
that's completely the choice of the framer, maybe your client. But weighted borders are not absolutely necessary, it's up to you. Typically, it's done more often on a larger landscape
Okay.
piece, so hopefully
Makes sense.
that's sort of helpful, so. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and insert this into this nice frame here. It's a nice silver looking frame. I see this comes with the hardware on the back too.
It
I'll
does.
just pull this off for
Those are
now. Let's set it
giblets is what we
aside.
call them.
Call them the giblets.
Because Amanda doesn't like it when we call them giblets.
Doesn't
so-
like that word,
No.
giblets? I don't like giblets either, but, okay, so this is a nice piece of pre-sized plexi that you can get from Jerry's here. Now typically plexi is going to have this protective sort of cover. This is a great time to be wearing your cotton gloves.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to be fighting your own fingerprints quite a bit. There's lots of different ways to clean glass or plexi. The advantage of plexi over glass is that it's not going to break. And it typically weighs less than glass does. Sometimes if you're a framer or you're an artist and you're doing a bid for a hospital building or a hotel or a government, code is going to
Yes,
call
yes,
for
yes,
plexi
yes.
where you can't use glass anyways. But there's a couple different ways to do it. Some people like a spray with a foaming spray with alcohol. Some people use warm water with just a little bit of soap in it. Sometimes people use newspaper. I like to use a microfiber cloth and really any kind of glass cleaner. The
Right.
thing is, especially on plexi, is don't over clean it because the more friction you put on it, it can create more static
Right.
energy and it'll start
How
drawing.
lovely, just starts picking up everything on
Yeah,
the table.
anything floating around your room is going to suddenly find your piece of plexi. So just lightly do it on both sides till it's nice and clear. What I like to do also too is when I have it nice and clean, what I do is I lay my artwork down and I lay the plexi on top of it, and now's when I inspect it and I look and see, okay, are there any little spots or any little things that I need to pull off
Right,
of here?
right,
It's the
right.
best time to do it. Again, if you have your gloves on, then it's a great time to be handling this. There's less likelihood of getting prints on it. So we'll say our plexi is ready to go. This is going to lay into the back of this 11 by 14 frame here.
Yeah, there's a little bit on the back. There's another.
Was there another? Oh,
Yep,
there's another.
it's coated
yeah.
on both sides.
It's coated on both sides. I thought it was only on the one.
Now we're sneaky like that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you spotted
And
that.
we're doing plexi because I've broken 2 pieces of glass
that
this
was
week
more
alone
clear.
for my own show.
Okay.
So I didn't need to break yet a third.
Well, that's a yeah.
One was a really expensive
Yeah.
piece of UV glass.
Glass will bite you a lot more than plexi.
Yeah.
So that's a nice clean piece of plexi we've got in here. Here's an 11 by 14 piece of art that drops in. The last piece you put in is typically going to be a 3/16 inch piece of foam board. Foam board's great. It's typically acid-free. It's lightweight, but it's sturdy. It doesn't add any extra real heavy weight to the frame. You could add pieces of mat board in the back if you wanted to, but mat board costs more than foam board typically, weighs more. So foam board's great. And all of our tools will cut at least 3/16 foam board. Some can go up to half-inch foam board. Certainly
Oh,
the one we
nice.
used here today will be 3/16. So this goes into the back. This is the time when you want to do more inspections on the
Yeah,
front,
yeah.
just to make sure everything looks right before you start driving any nails or
That
anything.
looks so pretty in that frame.
It does.
It actually does. It's a nice.
I didn't even know what he was bringing. I picked 3 frames and was like, something will work, and then was like, oh
It's
yeah,
real
that's that
beachy.
one.
It is beachy looking.
And that's our plein air frame, correct?
I know the way you said it didn't sound like beachy.
You're beachy.
Okay, so what I'm going to use now, this is a tool that Logan makes. It's called a dual drive. And what it does is it's a point driver. It drives points into the back of the rabbet of the frame. That little vertical ledge on the inside of the back of the frame that holds everything in, that's called a rabbet. and it's spelled a little bit different. It's not spelled like
Yes.
the rabbit, but we call it the rabbit. And what you need to do is drive some points in order to hold this completely in. So this is the point driver, the dual drive. And if we wanted to load points into it, you can sort of push on this little tab here. And there's a strip of points that'll come out the front here. That's a strip of some flexible ones. These are the black
Nice.
ones.
Yeah.
This will also fire a rigid point. The main difference between the flexible and the rigid is the flexible ones, and you'll see after I drive some, they can be bent up and bent
Yes.
back down if you needed to do
Makes
that.
it much easier.
In my experience, I just usually use the rigid because I don't really have
You like-
plans to change.
okay.
But it's completely your choice, and they go in the same way. You load these, make sure that the point is facing the proper direction, and drop it down into the groove there. And then you want to shut this piece here. So the point's going to come out the front of this, so you just put the nose right up against the inside of the rabbit, give that a squeeze, and then you kind of pull straight back. After you drive the point, try not to
Yes,
lift
yeah,
up.
because it will pull it up.
It'll sort of bend the point up, right? So you just put the nose up in here.
And I
drive the
notice you're
point.
not something to just, I'm saying this because I've seen people do it, especially with glass. They'll try to cram it down and almost push the foam board down to
Crush
push
it.
that in, and then that puts a lot of pressure on that glass.
It's not really necessary.
Yeah,
It's not really necessary. The way the tool works, it sort of toenails.
yes.
Which sort of a carpenter term, it sort of toenails the point
Right.
at a little bit of an angle, so it puts a little bit of pressure on the back. So you do them across the back, space them out, about 3 here, maybe 4 along the sides. You typically don't want to run them right up in the corner. I think the superstition of that is you don't want to impact hitting up near the corners
Right.
where the corners have been joined. So you
Right.
stay away from them a little bit. You want to do some points?
Sure.
Don't point that at me.
I know how to use these. I did those on that elephant you helped me with the other day.
It really does make it easy. It's so much easier with that little.
While Amy is stabbing things, one of our viewers asked why not hinge the artwork to the backing board.
Oh, you can do that. You can do that. You can do, and when you run the tape across the top edge of the backing and the mat itself, and that sort of will hinge it together. You can, but you know, if the artwork is hinged to the mat and then the backing drops in behind it, and you've got your points in, then nothing's going to move either. But I understand that's
Yes.
another way of doing it. You would run a bead of tape across the top and then fold the excess across
Yeah.
the back. Yes, you absolutely can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Typically, I just.
Space you got on the front of your artwork to.
If I think where that with this it doesn't really matter because it's going right in there. I think where that would be best employed is if you're putting this in a bag, you're not framing it
That's a good
and putting
point.
it in for a show.
If you're bagging
so
it,
it's
yeah.
not slipping and sliding around with that little bit
Yeah.
of just it kind of keeps it together so that when it's in that crystal seal bag or whatever, when people are looking
not
at it
gonna
at an art
slip
show,
around apart,
it's
yeah.
not kind of slipping and moving around. It
Yeah.
stays kind of in a nice joint. I don't think it's necessary.
It's your choice if you want to do it that way, but I think what you just said, it would be an excellent reason to do that if you can buy these large clear bags
Yes.
that usually have a full over flap that you can seal, and artists will put their art into these flip racks, and that way, if there's no frame, just like you said, it holds the two pieces together, they don't come apart, it stays together. So you're certainly welcome to do it that way, if the person would like to do it that way. Typically, I just T-hinge mount, put my backing in, and drive my points, and nothing's going anywhere at that point, So now we're ready to install the paper onto the back of the frame. And I brought a couple of pieces of pre-cut paper. This is just like kind of a craft paper is all this is. This is going to be big enough. It might be just big enough. So the idea is what we're going to do is we need to apply paper onto the back of this frame. This is typically called dust cover paper to keep dust out of the back of
Yeah,
it.
because you do still have some groove in here, dirt and debris, and
That's right. You don't want
if you have a fire, even just potentially smoke
Yeah.
could get in there.
That's absolutely
This
right.
keeps that so that's protected.
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. So really, pretty much any kind of craft paper works. It doesn't even necessarily have to be acid-free because it's on the back of your
Right.
frame anyway. So the way that I apply it is I use what's called an ATG tape. ATG is sort of it's a backless tape. It's not really double-sided. It's an adhesive that's applied to this paper. And you can use it, the roll in your hands like I'm going to do manually here. However, you can buy these and you can load them into a dispensing tool, what's called an ATG gun. I think ATG stands for adhesive transfer gun. I'm not totally sure, but I think it does. If you'd rather use it out of a gun where you can just pull the trigger and whip it around the back of the frame, that's a heck of a lot faster. It depends on how much of this framing you're doing. You can just use the tape in your hands like this and it gets away pretty good too. So I'm going to run a bead of the tape, and I don't want to have it all the way to the outside edge. I want to have it in just a little bit, and then run my finger along it. That way it gets the adhesive. The adhesive should sort of transfer off. And then when I lift up, this is now just dry paper, and what's left, here's our sticky.
It's like the sticky stuff inside of a mailer you get when they have those little big credit card things.
Very similar. Very similar. So I want to put some of that on all four sides. Again, I don't want to get too close to the outside edge. Maybe come in about a ½ inch or so. I probably could go actually a little bit closer to the edge, but this is a really wide profile frame.
Yeah, it
so
is.
It's a really nice frame. All right, get another piece here. Ooh, sometimes when it's warm out, this stuff doesn't want to cooperate as well.
It gets sticky in here too.
Yeah, that's what it is, but it's okay. You doing all right?
Yeah, she was asking me a question.
Just want to make sure we're on schedule here.
Oh, no, we're good.
All right, last side here. We're gonna strip along here again. You lift up. The sticky stays on the frame. This is dry paper. So now I want to put the paper on. I find the best way to put the paper on. Someone taught me this a long time ago. Just lay the paper out flat. And I had to ship this here, so it kind of got rolled up a little bit crinkly, but that's okay. Lay the paper out flat. Take your frame, hold it over the top of the paper, drop it. That is the most even way. So you don't want to drop it from 3 feet up.
Yeah.
But just
Especially with UV glass.
yeah, it was
that's
certainly
what I
with
would
glass,
do.
right? But then you know it's going to grab on there nice and even like that. You know, if you had your gloves on, you wouldn't be worried about anything on your frame either. So your paper's on. And what I'm going to do is fold the edges over. This paper is just big enough for this frame. And I'm going to use a tool called a dust cover trimmer. And what this does is it's going to trim this paper back, and it's going to do it in a really nice way. It's just going to trim it just out from the outside edge in, so it looks really professional. You could take a ruler, and you could take a X-Acto knife, and you could do this by hand. This is a lot faster and a lot easier. So this is a dust cover trimmer. Logan makes this. This is another item you can get from Jerry's. There's a little blade cover on here. If I loosen this knob, it slides back to expose the edge of the blade right there, so it's ready to use. All you're going to do is just start all the way up at the corner, put a little bit of tilt on this tool, and run it right along the edge, and pull straight back. You're going to want to do this on all four corners. Yep. This is typically a lot. Yeah. This is a lot quicker than using a ruler and an X-Acto knife typically. That's a nice job.
This will probably be even faster than you would use with an X-Acto knife.
Yeah.
Right, you're not carving into the frame.
Yeah.
And same thing on this too. You don't want to be putting a lot of pressure. You're not trying to cut a groove into your frame.
Right.
You're just trimming the paper. So just a little light amount of pressure is typically more than enough. All right. If you do it right, usually what will happen is a nice square piece of paper comes off the back. See, I got my tape a little bit to the outside there, but that's okay. You can always tape your fingers and rub the excess off. So here's the excess which comes off, and here's your nice dust cover. Now sometimes this will still have a little bit of wrinkle in it, and there's a couple of tricks on how to tighten this paper if you wanted to. One way is you could get like a spray bottle of water and spray this. You don't want to soak it.
Right.
But definitely get some water into this, and then immediately take like a hairdryer and hold a hairdryer to it.
Shrink just that little bit.
And it's gonna tighten up really. It's gonna pull all these wrinkles out. It's gonna look very, very professional. Technically, you can actually just take the hairdryer without the water and put it on there too. But I think the water gives a little bit more because it forces it to dry so quickly
Right.
that it pulls that paper really, really tight, and it looks really nice like that. So, at this point, we would put the hardware on. Now, it looked like this frame came with the hardware
Dude.
that we use. I'm not going to go through the steps of installing the hardware because there's not much to talk about, but
Yeah,
we'll look
they've
at what
seen
was
that with some of
included.
our framing too. So
We've got 2 D-rings here, and we've got the screws to put them in. What you're going to do is you're going to figure out, these D-rings typically have a top and a bottom, so make sure you've got them the right direction. I usually take a ruler and measure the full length. Now, actually, I'm doing this wrong because this is a horizontal picture, which would go this way. So, my pieces would, yeah, I caught
I
it.
noticed. I was like, woo!
I caught it.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah. So what I would usually do is I would measure it roughly a third of the way down
Right.
from the top. make a little pencil mark, and then I would take like an awl or a pick to put a little
Yeah.
dent in there, and then put the screws in and tighten these up, and you install these two pieces. And then you would pull your wire through. There's a couple different kinds of wire that you can buy out there. Make sure you get a wire that has a weight rating to what you're using. If you've got a great
Yes,
big
that's
picture, then
the biggest thing you need to definitely pay attention to.
don't get anything that's too thin. I particularly like the coated wire, although you can get uncoated wire, it's whichever which you like. And you pull it through and you cut off and leave about 4 or 5 inches extra on the end. You fold it over through the hook and then back through itself, and then you roll it up. And I sort of finished
Yes.
one here that I had done before, just to give you an idea. This is
Yeah.
the different dust cover paper that I had, but ran it through both sides, ran it through itself, kind of makes these little stirrup shapes here, and then you twist it up and clip it off. And everybody does it a little bit different. Any way that you do it, as long as you accomplish your wire in the back, it's fine. There should be a little bit of slack on the wire like I've got there. The last two pieces I put on the back of the frame here are some rubber bumpers or felt bumpers, which I have right here. And they only have to go on the bottom, so they don't have to go on all the other 4 sides, just on the bottom. The whole purpose of the bumpers, it's supposed to keep the frame from scratching the wall. It's supposed to hold the back of the frame off the wall to let a little bit of ambient light through, so that when you move and you sell your home and take the pictures down, you don't have all these dark
Right.
spots. I don't know if I really believe that or not,
yeah.
but that's one of the things. The other reason that you put them on is it's supposed to allow better air circulation through the back of the frame for preventing like condensation or something like that in
Right.
the glass. So it's a good idea to put the bumpers on.
The rubber ones kind of keep it, if you're especially if you're trying to hang a gallery show, from if it's not quite on that hook exactly, it keeps it from sliding.
Yeah, they're a little bit tacky.
Yeah.
They stick a little bit better. So you can get them in felt or you can get them in
Yeah.
rubber. I think I like the rubber ones better.
I do
but,
too.
but as long as you use something.
For small pieces, I think the felt's
Oh, I think it's fine probably for the
great.
felts, yeah.
It's you don't have that issue as much.
Right, right.
I just like that the bumpers keep the picture more parallel to the wall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That drives me crazy.
When they're
especially
tilting.
around here with all the doors,
Yes.
heavy doors slamming and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the hardware part of it, and hypothetically, this frame would be now done. We'd be able to put this right on the wall, be ready to go. The last thing I thought I would do, if we've got time, is I thought maybe
Yeah,
I'd
please,
whip out a
that'd
quick
be-
double mat.
We had people
And,
asking about that, so.
A double
Yes,
mat?
they have
Okay.
been asking already.
Okay, we will do a double mat.
That's what Amanda was mouthing it to me, and then I was dancing the robot off the screen because I was like, I've got no idea what you're saying, but I'm dancing the robot.
Okay, so we're gonna do a double mat here. I'm gonna pick 2 different colors to do a double. I brought a couple of colors here. Let's see here. There's kind of a, I don't have a whole lot of colors. I'll probably do, I'll do white over, would you prefer white over red or the gray, or do you like this kind of turquoisey?
I like the white and red.
You like the white and red?
Yeah.
Okay. we'll
I
do
actually
white
like
and
the
red.
red and gray, but that's probably.
You can do any color combination that you see fit.
Oh yeah, because you're saying NC State.
Definitely can.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to do a double mat, and I think I have a double mat in my stack of, do I have a double mat in here?
There was one.
Show one.
Yes.
Yeah, there it
There we
is.
go. Oop.
Just to make sure everyone knows what a double mat looks like. So this is a double mat. It's got your top mat, and then it's got the color on the inside. This is typically referred to as the liner mat. It's the mat on the back, but we call it the liner mat. The back bit's going to sort of look like this when we get finished here. This is one that's been riding around in a box a little bit, so it's kind of dirty. But if you notice on this mat, and the one that I'm going to do here, I've got the lighter color on the top, and the darker color is going to be the liner mat. Typically, framers do it that way, and you don't have to. But the theory sort of behind that is that if your overall dominant color is a lighter color, then when you put it on the wall, the piece looks bigger on the wall than it does
that's a
with the
good
darker
point.
color. It's also believed that when you have a darker liner mat color in the middle, it draws your eye to the middle of the artwork a little bit better. It's believed. But you know, sometimes you're doing team colors or kids art,
Right.
and you have to put a dark blue over the white. Well, then so be it. You do whatever you think
Right.
looks good. But in general, if you notice, you'll see that the doubles are usually done this way. So I'm going to go by traditional means here. This will be my top. This will be my liner mat. The first thing I have to do is I have to cut the liner mat so it's down a little bit smaller. I can't leave them the same size. I need this to be a little bit smaller. An easy way to do that in this machine, I could use the mat knife if I wanted to, but I don't have a blade in it. So I'll just use the bevel cutter here.
Now, What is the reason for that?
The
Out of
reason is, it's,
curiosity.
when you put everything together, it makes it much easier to line the two mats up, and it gives you more distance to the outside of the rabbet to drive your points in.
Oh.
So there actually is reason for it, yeah. When we actually do the assembly, you'll see the,
That makes sense.
see where it
Perfect
makes a
sense.
lot of sense, yeah. So I'm gonna use the bevel cutter like a trimming tool, so I'm gonna leave my slip sheet in. I'm gonna take the piece of mat board, I'm gonna put maybe, you know, maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch underneath the guide rail here. I don't even care if it's really all that straight, as long as I just got enough of it underneath here. I'm gonna use the bevel cutter, drop the blade, and just take a chunk off one side. Turn it a quarter turn, put it back in. Same thing. I'm just using the bevel cutter kind of like a trimming tool. So I took these two pieces off the top and the bottom. I'm not having to take them off all four sides, just the one off the long, one off the short. And now you can see it's smaller, just like we wanted.
Right.
So we're going to cut the top one first. And I'll start with a 3-inch border again.
So we're actually putting them together and then cutting the other mat?
Yeah, you're gonna
I
cut
was
the top mat
I was
first.
panicking a little bit when you said, it doesn't matter if it's really not that straight. I was like, how is it gonna go?
Well, the
match
back
up
one
against
doesn't matter.
Yeah, oh, exactly. But it was that panic because I didn't know we were being all secret and crazy.
Yeah, you sort of do double mats kind of in the reverse order.
Yeah.
You have to do your math in the reverse order and do the math of a mat that actually touches the artwork first, and then figure out what the difference from the top to bottom is going to be. The difference from the top to the bottom mat is usually about 1/4 inch, a stagger or reveal sometimes it's called, but you can do whatever you think looks good on your piece.
If you were to do a triple mat, would you
Yes?
still do the 1/4 inch reveal?
It really depends on what you think is the best, what looks the best, but you certainly could. You know, I mean, 1/4 inch is pretty standard, but sometimes if a framer is, say, doing a double mat on a full-size watercolor piece landscape, they might do a 3/8 reveal
Yeah,
or something a little bit
'cause
bigger,
it'd be a
because
big-
otherwise
big
it
piece.
might get a little bit lost. Okay, so I got my top mat cut. This is a 3-inch border.
Does that in like 2 seconds.
I know.
No big deal.
Now I'm going to make sure that the window dropout stays in place. I'm going to lay the mat down face down. Take some more of this ATG tape. And I'm going to put some ATG tape on all 4 sides.
He's like a magician.
There.
Yeah.
Elizabeth on YouTube says, if we're still into that 100 layers challenge, y'all should do a mat board. It would be 5
Oh my
feet
gosh. It's like shadow
deep.
box
It would have to
matting.
be a box.
Yeah.
It would be a box. So I've got some on all 4 sides, and then the last pieces you want to put on, these are very important. I usually sort of make an X shape in the middle of the dropout.
Yeah, so it pulls it out when you.
The 2 windows need to stick together when the mat finishes, so they drop out, stick together. So I've got my ATG on here.
It's so smart. It's just like,
Just make sure that your tape is not too close to where your borders are. So if
Yeah.
you think it's a little bit too close, just use your fingers and you can just roll it back a little bit. But see how I've got nice clearance here from where the tape is to where my actual border cuts are. Okay, this is one of the reasons now why we cut the liner mat smaller, because if we would have left it the same size, it would have to very carefully be lining up.
Right,
You'd have to
right,
very
right,
carefully
right.
be doing this. But because it's a little bit smaller, well, it's super easy. Just drop it on there. And you're not even worried if this is sitting perfectly straight.
I don't
It
know
doesn't
if
matter.
anybody's ever told you this, but you make matting interesting.
That's accomplishment.
It's like this is absolutely
like-
fascinating.
I don't know if I would have ever thought that.
No,
but as soon as
who
you
would
said it, I'm
think?
like, duh.
I know, it's like you
Light
feel like a
bulb?
yeah.
It also makes it easier too, because remember, you have to be driving points into the back of this, and you
Right,
have to
right,
put the
right.
glazing in, which is
Yeah,
your
that
plexi or
makes
glass.
sense.
You got backing to go in. So if you're not using backing, that's when you would have to make for sure to leave yourself some room out here to get your points in. So now we put the tape in the middle, those pieces, the X shape, so that this window holds in
Right.
place. So now these first borders, these were 3 inches. So we better cut these borders at least something bigger than 3 inches.
Right.
We can't go the other direction. So
No.
I would say at least 3 1/4 if you want to see 1/4 inch of that back
Right.
mat, which is standard. This is a 1/4 inch reveal here. If you want to do a 1/4 inch, then I would set this out to 3 1/4. And then mark out all 4 borders, just like normal, and make sure that you've run the mat guide the proper direction.
Yeah.
Because if you go the wrong direction, you'll still have a double mat when
It'll
you're
just
done.
be very
But
interesting.
you won't see the back one. The back one will be behind the first one. You won't see it. So,
It's matting what you feel, man.
all right. So I've got these all marked out. Sometimes people say, "Well, do I have to increase my blade depth?" No, you're still cutting one mat. It just happens to be
Right.
stuck to the back of of your first one. So, all right, go to the line. Sometimes what I do is I take a piece of masking tape and stick it on the end of that slip sheet so it doesn't, so I'm not fighting it when I'm
So
turning stuff
everybody's
around.
fascinated by this as we are.
Oh, Elizabeth just got her popcorn. We're just.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. All right. Okay, I think I have one side left to do. So what should happen here is the two windows, which are taped together, they're going to fall out taped together. And you'll have
Like a magic trick.
I was-
a double mat.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like I just watched a magic.
I know.
that's pretty amazing. Yeah. So
He's
here's
got
your
the
two
card behind his
windows.
ear. the mat piece.
The whole thing.
So somebody mentioned a triple mat. So how would you turn this into a triple mat if you want to make this a triple?
Tape another one to the
Yep.
back.
You would take your dropout, you would lay it face
Oh
down,
my gosh.
and you would apply tape around the back here. You would apply a second liner, which again is cut down a little bit smaller. Put the whole thing back into the machine. Make sure you set the mat guide for a little bit wider
Yeah.
border again. Then when you cut that opening, then 3 windows will fall out and you'll have a triple. So that technique forces these to be perfectly even.
Yeah.
Sometimes people assume that to do a double mat, you cut 2 mats separately with slightly different openings, and then you try to carefully glue them together, and that just never works.
That's what I would think.
That's what-
yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's
what
why-
that seems like the
This forces it to come out perfectly.
Wow.
And remember, we didn't even care if we had cut this back one
Yeah.
square. It didn't even really matter if it was
That's
really.
what my
Yeah, yeah.
mind got blown right there. He's
I
like, we
know.
don't care. I'm like, but it's gonna
I
be
know.
cracking again.
Paste it to the back.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's your double mat.
Wow.
Can we
And,
demo a V groove?
You know, I don't have a V-groover here. We used to have, we used to do V-grooving tools that would hook onto the various machines that we have. And it was a double-bladed item, and one blade went one direction, came out, then the other blade came back the other way, and it would cut a V-groove. And you would do that on all 4 sides. V-grooves just sort of, I think the popularity of V-grooves have sort of waned to some extent. The other thing is too, is so many frame shops now have computerized mat cutters that they can do V-grooves so easily as compared to the old way. There is a technique of the old traditional way of doing a V-groove, which is a skill. And the way it works is you would cut a window out of a piece of mat board, and then you would take the window and put it back in the machine color side up, and very carefully use your bevel cutter to reverse the direction of the bevel on all 4 sides, and then tape it back into the opening. And then you would have 2 opposite bevels facing each other, and that would be the V-groove. That is
Wow.
not necessarily easy. It can be done. I actually haven't done one myself for a very long time, but it can be done. It's called trimming and taping, and it's the old way of doing V-grooves. These days, it's pretty easy for your framer to do them because it's part of the CMC programming, and it's really easy to add a V-groove. So.
I think I would just cry.
yeah, it's just like that went beyond math. Now we're in trigonometry. I'm
All
done.
3 of us behind the scenes, our eyes went wide and soft.
We also have this
Glazed.
border app that I wanted to just quickly point out. We went through all the different
Vanna.
math and things. We have a border app that's free that if you were to put in the size of your art and the size of your mat that it's putting in for you, it will calculate your border sizes for you. But it's good to learn the old way to do it. I think everyone should know how to use a ruler and do some basic math. But it is available. It's on the App Store or on Google Play. Are there any more questions?
Yeah.
Tips and tricks for oval and circle mat cutting.
Okay. Oval and circle mat cutting. We have an oval cutter that works entirely on its own. It's number 201 oval and circle cutter. You do not have to have any other equipment to use the 201 oval cutter. I don't have one here at the moment, but you can see it. Jerry sells it. If you look on our website, you can watch videos on how it's used. And you essentially press the base into the color side of the piece of mat board with a scrap piece underneath it. And there's an arm with a scale on it with a cutting head that makes 3 rotations. Every time you make a rotation, you click the blade 1 step down further, and on the 3rd pass, it goes all the way down and gives you an
Oh, wow.
oval. So it'll either do an oval or a circle. It has a maximum of a 3-inch differential between what the width and the height of the circle or the oval is. So you can do a 5x7, you can do a 9x12, 11x14. It'll hit a lot of standard sizes. It's designed to work with standard thickness mat board,
Okay.
and it does cut a bevel. So that's the best way to do an oval or a circle if you need one, and you don't need any other equipment to do that. You just need the oval cutter itself.
Nice. We want to mention this while we're.
Oh yeah, also want to
Well,
mention
we're,
this.
Real quick, the girls are linking to the oval cutter on the site in the
Oh,
comments,
perfect.
and there's, I think, a how-to video on the page, or at least an
Yeah.
demonstration
The
video on the
videos,
page.
Yes.
Okay. Real quick, this book here, this is a book that Logan produced, I think in the mid-2000s, and we now provide, it's the most comprehensive book that we've ever done. It's on mat cutting and framing. It has everything that I've talked about and even goes further into different techniques. And this is available free for a download on the Logan website. It's under, I think it's under our Learning Center link that's on logangraphic.com.
You guys have the link for that, so you can,
Yeah.
they'll put the link on.
Yep, so you can print out your own version of this, or you can just reference it online. This is a great book that goes over everything that I just talked about, and then also the videos that we have. If you go to our website or our YouTube channel, you'll see videos on all these techniques and a lot more techniques. How to check the squareness of your squaring arm if you have a squaring arm, how to adjust your blade depth, it goes completely over that, and a lot of cutting techniques, including how to do a double mat. There's probably 2 or 3 different versions of videos on double matting.
That's fantastic.
Any other questions?
He's been pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I
It's,
think
it's
it's
hard to,
great.
Everybody's
Yeah.
just been in awe.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, you made mat cutting exciting.
Oh, great. Great.
Now you're like,
Well, I enjoy
you're
it.
a superstar.
It's fun. I can tell you that
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun to mat and frame your own pieces. It's very satisfying to pick out your own colors, put it together. It doesn't even matter if you're, if you're not, even if you're buying pre-cut mats, there's just still something about putting it together yourself and then putting it on the wall. So everybody's got stuff at home. You probably got autographs or collectibles or
Yes,
kids' arts or
yes.
diplomas or class pictures or something. This stuff should be on your wall.
Right.
So, don't let it sit in a drawer.
They're already downloading your app.
All right. Good. It's a good app. Good. Actually, we're going to be making some updates to that app here pretty soon. So, all right. I think that's
That's
all that
fantastic.
I really had planned for today. I hope everyone watching enjoyed it and learned something. And of course, if you have
We
questions,
enjoyed it. That was fantastic.
you
We
can
really
call us.
appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate being here. This was a lot of fun. I was
Thank you,
looking
thank
forward to
you.
this. Any questions you have on mat cutting equipment, of course, you can always call Logan. Everybody who answers the phone, we're all mat cutters, so you're not going to get passed around to different technical
Oh, nice.
departments. We all cut mats. Probably
That's
the first person
fantastic.
you talk to will help you, or you very well could talk to me. I do a lot of technical calls and just general questions too. So,
One of our customers just asked about a sub window in a mat.
you mean like a title box
Okay.
or like a signature box for? Yeah,
I was like, what does that mean?
yeah, that could be where you.
Well,
Say you've cut a mat like this and you want another opening down here because maybe there's a little engraved plate.
I know.
Or there could be an artist's signature or something like that. Yeah, that absolutely can be done. It's just when you're marking out your windows, you mark out your main window, then you do the math and you mark out the small window for the title. And then you cut the same way. Make sure you cut on the proper sides of the line so you don't get a reversed bevel. And you can cut them in any order you want. You can do the big one first and the small one second or whatever. It's just simple math. Typically what I do when I'm doing a mat that's a little more complicated, like a multiple opening, maybe 2 or 3 openings or something like that, I'll just take a piece of paper and I'll draw a box with the boxes inside of it. And I'll just do the math and I'll write all the numbers in. And when all the numbers equal up both directions as I want to and they land at the whole number they're supposed to, then I'm ready to start doing my actual marking on the back of the mat. So I do the math first.
Now with those sub boxes
Title
or
box?
whatever, yeah, a title box, would that be when it would be good to err on a little bit heavier weight at the
It's
bottom?
probably necessary.
Just to not make it look all crammed in together?
Yeah, it's probably going to be necessary because typically when you see title boxes, they're going to be on larger landscape pieces.
Yes.
And when you have a larger landscape piece, that's where you get this illusion that the bottom border looks thinner. It is not thinner, but it
Right.
will look thinner. So it's probably a good idea to do that math and maybe pad this bottom by a ½ inch or so. A proper weighted border, you can't tell it's a weighted border. If you've done it
Right,
right.
right.
That's sometimes people say, how do I do the weighted border? Why do I need to do them? Traditionally it's to knock out that illusion that makes the bottom
Right.
border look thinner. And if you've accomplished that, then you've done a proper weighted border. If you're getting into a great big deep border on purpose, that's sort of a different thing. It's a
Right.
weighted border, but it's intentionally meant to have this dramatic bottom border.
Right.
So, but yeah, you absolutely can do title boxes or sub windows or whatever they're called. It's just as easy as cutting the regular main opening. You just do your math first and then transfer it to the back of the mat. Any other questions?
Getting all technical with it.
I think you got most of them. Wow. People would ask and then you go right into it.
Yep.
Yeah, like
Okay.
literally as
Second.
people would ask, you would be like, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I've done this a couple of times, so usually I know the
Once or
questions
twice.
that people ask. But again, you can call the number. You can call the 800 number, and we'll talk to you about any questions you have on mat cutting and do our best. We get calls every day from people who are ready to buy cutters and they have no idea which one to buy, and we're all very used to that. So,
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. If we don't have any other questions, I think we're done.
All right.
I think this has been wonderful. Really, honestly, I mean, that couldn't have been.
It's intimidating to look at those
Oh,
things.
incredibly, yeah.
And it's
This is a much better
nearly
mat.
as
Yeah.
complicated as it looks.
No,
And
it's
he's
really
like,
not.
Presto chango, here's a
Yeah,
double
well,
mat.
but it's also from having done matting before, also a very good quality mat cutter, even with this being a very basic one. You guys have all the, have thought of so many different. I gave up mat cutting after the first one that I had to use, which was not one of you guys's, but it was also the
Oh, I have a question.
80s or early 90s. Yes.
Yes.
Like fancy corners.
Fancy corners. Fancy how? Like stepped corners, things like
It
that?
says it's fancy corners.
Okay, fancy corners could be a lot of different things. Sometimes you might see a corner, and I don't know if I could draw one out here. Where'd my little pencil go?
Right there.
Oh,
Like
here
the
it
little
is.
French corners.
Yeah, you might have maybe a corner that has like steps in it, like this, where the corners, and then sometimes it's called like a southwest corner. There's a technique how to do that, and I think that's explained in the book. It's definitely on our website also. It's actually a series of marking out 3 or 4 different borders and then intentionally cutting the wrong sets of borders when the machine's set on the wrong sets of lines, and it sort of tricks the machine to leave these step corners. So you're not turning corners with the cutting head, which a lot of people may assume. If you're talking about a corner that has any kind of a radius in it, that is probably done by a CMC or a computerized mat cutter today, because our board-mounted mat cutters are essentially straight line cutters, is what they're going to do. They're not really designed to do a corner, because that's going to put a lot of flex on the blade. Now, there are some mats that you can do, like, let me just grab this real here.
Yeah.
You can do a mat that sort of has a straight opening that looks like this, and then it's got a big dome top. And that's sort of called Romanesque or dome mat. These are actually pretty easy, but you would need our 201 oval cutter. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to cut 2 different openings. You want to do your math first, say to cut your square opening, and you're going to leave a lot of extra space up here because you got to allow for this dome up in here. You cut that window out, but then tape it in from the back of the mat, and then on the front, set your oval cutter and cut the oval. And if you have your oval cutter set at the right size, then the oval piece falls out, the square piece falls out, and what's left over on the front is this shape.
It's magic.
And it's not done by turning corners with the cutting head. It's actually a combination of the oval cutter and a straight cutter, and there's instructions on how to do that. But if you see a corner with little shapes in it, typically that's going to be done by a computerized mat cutter today, or it could be done by a very skilled framer with a handheld, like an X-Acto knife. There's some people in the industry. There's a guy named Brian Williams, who's to me the greatest, and Brian Wolf, not Brian Williams, Brian Wolf, and he has worked for Crescent on and off for many years, and he is a master of taking a handheld knife and making these mats that are absolutely amazing. But that's a skill. People say, can I do that? And I say, I don't know, can you?
Maybe in like 6 years.
Yeah, because I can't, and I've been doing this for a long time. So, I can say though that people a lot of times will say, oh, can I do all these fancy corners and things like that? But when it comes down to it, 90% of the mats are rectangle mats with rectangle openings. We have machines that can cut the state of Texas shape, and that's great, but who really wants, maybe on a novelty mat or something like that, the majority of what you see for fine art is going to typically be single and double mats. When it comes to colors, there are hundreds of colors available, but your whites and your blacks are usually number 1 and number 2. We sell a line of pre-cut mats at Logan, and I think 40% of our sales are black and white mats. And it didn't matter if we had 1,000 other colors, it would still be 40% of the sales is black
Right.
and white. So it usually starts with those, and you get into some earth tones. Sometimes if you want brighter colors, it's because if you're matching team, and I've done a lot of sports mats for friends over the years, or if you have
Right.
like kids art sometimes.
Yes.
There's a mat board out there that has a core to it that's a color called color core, where it'll have a white surface, but the inside is red or blue or yellow, which is really nice for like kids art or something like that. So it can be done. It's in reality, it's actually not as common as you might think.
And the book does cover the step
I think the step corner's in
corners
there. Yep.
and even how to do a shadow box effect.
It does shadow box here. All right, here's the step corner.
Yep.
And I think we have a video on the step corner too, on how to do a step corner mat. Sometimes it's called a southwest corner with the steps on it.
Yep.
If I'm doing classes anywhere in the Southwest in Santa Fe, I always show that mat because people love it, because it's a regional thing.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it looks fantastic on their art. In the Northeast, they don't care so much, but
Yeah.
because it's just not really, it's not
No.
really a thing, but it's a nice technique to do with that style of art with pastel sort of colors, desert looking theme pieces, so.
This is great. It goes through everything that you've shown us here and then some. So
Yeah,
that's,
it covers a lot of
fantastic.
picture framing too.
yeah, yeah.
As well, so. Any other questions? Okay,
Well, Brian, thank you so much for being here with us, and we
I appreciate being here.
thank them at Logan for lending you to us.
I was happy to come down
for this
here.
episode.
Was
Happy to come down to the Swell 3 South.
Yeah, it
We're
can get pretty
sorry
warm
about
down
that.
here.
At least it's cooler than normal.
Yeah,
So,
it is. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone being here. If you have questions, please contact us. Happy matting.
and next week, it's JL68. Is that
69.
60? No, it's 68's today.
Mm-hmm.
It's flying. Next week, we've got Ophelia in the house with some journaling. So that ought to be fun. Just kind of some wacky, fun journaling. And who knows when you get Ophelia and I together what it's going to turn into. So it should be an interesting time. And then the week after that, we've got the top 15 acrylic mistakes, acrylic painting mistakes that people make. And it was hard to narrow it down to 15. so that ought to be interesting. But thank you again for coming. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to contact Logan. Yes, one
What
more.
about the cheat sheet that we?
Cheat sheet?
Oh, yeah.
Cheat sheet, this is essentially a decimal fraction equivalent scale. And you can find these online. I don't
Okay.
necessarily think they call them cheat sheets. I call it a cheat sheet. But this is a 1 inch represented in both fraction and decimal. And this can be handy if you're measuring a piece of artwork and it's not landing on these nice comfortable numbers that you can calculate in your head. You know, sometimes if you had asked 5 different people to divide 3/4 in half, you might get several different answers possibly. So you can
Math.
look at it's a little bit of math. So don't worry about the math. I don't know if that's.
The border, there's a
border
border
finders,
finder
yeah.
that's just suggested
border
borders
finders,
for
yeah.
different sizes. So.
Mhm. So this isn't a very difficult thing to find. It's just essentially an equivalence of fraction to decimal on 1 inch, which can be helpful if you have some piece of artwork that are not as cooperative on the numbers. That way you can temporarily turn that number, that fraction that you've measured, temporarily turn into a decimal point so that you can use your calculator to do the math. And when you're done, you turn it back into the fraction so you know where to set your math guide. So it's just sort of circumvents the math.
Yeah.
The way I like to say it.
We might see if Brian will let us make a copy of it and we can put a PDF in the Jerry's
That's a great idea.
live group.
That's a great idea.
And you know what? We haven't mentioned it in a while. There is a private Jerry's Facebook Live group for Jerry's Live. If you don't know about it, we've kind of, I guess with YouTube, kind of neglected to mention that. You just need to go to groups. It's Jerry's Live. Sign up. You do have to answer the question. It's just to make sure you're not a robot. Apparently they like Facebook, and then get into that group every week. When it's stuff that I've done, I put my notes in the group so that people can go back and go over something so they don't have to watch the episode multiple times. We'll see if Brian will be nice enough to let us make a photocopy of this
Sure.
after this, and we can put the PDF in there so
Absolutely.
they don't have to scrounge around the internet for it.
Nope, I'll give you my copy and then you can make it available to
Okay,
everybody.
awesome. I'll put that up tomorrow. But join us in that group. And also, if they'd like to follow me on Facebook, I've got a show. If you live in the Raleigh area, this first Friday, you can come down and actually meet me. So, I know.
Little
Enter
favorite
at your
shameless
own
self-promotion there.
Oh, no, just people are always asking, and I'm always like, yeah. So, it's on my page now. So now they know I kind of have to say it. So. But thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Brian. And
you.
we will see you guys next week with Ophelia.
Okay, bye-bye.